G'day guys, my name is LordTomos here again with another LordTomos comic pick of the week. I don't know, let's work with that, shall we? Who knows what's going to happen with this, maybe a month, maybe a week, who really knows. Anyway, so this comic I've actually picked up roughly 2 months ago. Normally what I tend to do before I show you the comic, you probably can read from the title itself. Normally what I tend to do when I go to my comic store, besides before I pick up my standing orders and all that sort of stuff, I tend just to look around, see any comics that might spark my interest. I pick it up, flick through it, and that sort of stuff. There is one that more or less sparked my interest. However, it's one of those comics where I'm kind of in the how would you say, kind of in the middle of it. I'm hoping it progressively is a more conclusive story as to what they're trying to aim for, but I'll show you what it is and I'll tell you more or less my thoughts. The actual comic that I've picked for this more or less week is pretty much Memorial. Just guys, it's one of those weeks, I suppose. Memorial. Basically, this is the actual comic itself. This is issue 2. I haven't actually placed this on my standing order as of yet. What I tend to do with comics that I'm not too, nicky picky with it, I tend to just basically, pick it up every so often when I go into the comic store and that sort of stuff. This one is one of those comics that I picked up. I picked up issue 2 in Free Comic Book Day, not as a free comic, but more or less as a purchase itself. The actual publication is IDW, for those who may or may not know, or more or less want to branch out, either the Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse, or if you know, there are different various publications. In this one, it's the IDW. Pretty much I guess for the better of the word, the conclusive story, I wouldn't say conclusive, but the story so far to date is pretty interesting. It deals with the concept of imaginary sort of stuff, more or less. Pretty much what you have is you have a young girl who more or less gets pretty much thrown into the world of the imaginary, or what they like to refer to as the world of maybe, which I think is pretty interesting to say the least. Basically, in essence, what it is this girl gets sucked into the world of maybe, which has issue 2 anyway, more or less I guess conveys that it's become a world of turmoil. Basically, it's become very chaotic. There is, from what I can gather, from what they explained, a kingdom where the kingdom of imaginary, maybe, I don't know, they call it the imaginary world, basically gets formed in creation more or less through the dreams and imagination of children far and near. So for example, if you're a kid and you imagine yourself to be an awesome Power Ranger fighting this mad Megazord, this more or less would basically indicate that in an alternate universe it actually gets forged, it actually gets created. That being said, with good imaginations, also negative imaginations, and obviously those will be the kids who, for whatever reason, have quite sinister sort of characteristics in themselves and more or less see the bad part of the world, I suppose, and that's what they imagine. And in this world of imagination is where these creatures get formed and whatnot. However, in this world of, before I get to the actual story itself, it's quite convoluted once you start the way I'm explaining it, but it's pretty cohesive and it's pretty consistent in terms of how it's actually done. Now, in the world of imaginations, it is ruled by, from what I can determine, a young lady who watches over the world of imagination, sort of thing, and she, I guess, for the most part, creates harmony with the chaos and order that occurs. With every good there's a bad, with every bad there is a good. Now that we have established the general premise of this major concept that this comic is more or less going for, what does it actually entail? You have a young man, I won't reveal names because I encourage people to pick up these comics and read for themselves. Plus, it's obviously, you give enough to the viewers to basically incite them to actually pick it up and go to the comic stores. I don't know, that's how I see things. That's how I'm more or less playing with some channel-ish kind of way. Basically, you have this young gentleman who unfortunately has a grandmother who's gone a bit senile, and yeah, she's in the cuckoo asylum. Not yet, but she will get there eventually. And she pretty much had a creature, a doll. Now, this is the actual doll. It isn't the actual size of the doll. I don't know, it's stuffed teddy bear. It isn't the actual actual size. It's actually an actual physical stuffed teddy bear, more or less like this, you could say. The actual stuffed teddy bear, and yeah, it manifests into the creature you see there through the art of imagination, as they say and as they were. Basically, this this man's daughter gets pretty much sucked into the world of imagination, and this is all new to him. He's kind of frantic. He's kind of like, whoa, what's going on? This is the first. Now, why this creature supposedly grabbed his daughter is because she has quite the vivid imagination, I would assume. Doesn't exactly 100% make clear. Mind you, this is my, I guess, general views and general ideas from the first two comics that I've read. It is new. It's just recently, you could say recently been released. And this young lady, this girl, has a vivid imagination, and they somehow, from what I can gather today, they want to use her imagination, her vivid imagination, to create a portal between the actual, I guess, imagination world, and I'm guessing to the world of the real, which is our world. That's my guess. It doesn't make 100% clear to date that's the intention. So what does this man do? He wants to obviously save his daughter. Now, the interesting thing is, to his dismay, his stuffed animal, which was passed to him by his mother, who was once not possessed, but who once was owned, his daughter, no, okay, let me repeat that. His mother owned the stuffed teddy bear, who she had a vivid imagination. She gave the stuffed teddy bear to her son, which is this guy, who then has his own imaginations with those sort of stuff. And obviously he hasn't passed it on to his daughter as of yet. I don't believe he might have. I'm not 100% sure. New comic, work with me here. And yeah, he more or less, and she gets sucked in. Now you have two, which I would class as, I guess, you know, imaginary wizards, if you can really call them, which are pretty much this old man and this young girl. These guys basically come into the fray of the situation once they find out what's more or less occurring, and they basically want to, I guess, help. Well, predominantly they wanted to basically rectify the issue of the world of the imaginary, simply because it's gone chaotic. The person who supposedly was ruling this world of imagination has some gone, you know, I don't know, disappeared, kidnapped, murder, doesn't really make clear. New comic, work with it. And they're trying to, you know, restore order into the world of the imaginary. As to why they would want to, being that the world of the imaginary is the world of the imaginary and our world is beyond me. Maybe there's some sort of connection that they'll establish down the track. He's hoping, I hope so, because if they don't really explain that, that to me would be a massive killjoy. So today they're just more or less trying to find A, what happened to the world of the imaginary, and B, where's daughter? How does she play into the fray of the world of the imaginary? Now, ideally, the way they've done it, the way they would go into the real world to that of the world of the imaginary is through portals, magic. They haven't really explained it. To me, any comic that doesn't really necessarily, I know, you know, mutant powers don't actually exist. I know, you know, fireballs don't actually exist in people's hands when they're trying to manifest it, like, you know, Mortal Kombat and that sort of stuff. I get that, but a little elaboration goes a long way, in my opinion, to an extent. You know, work with us, don't just say, oh, I created a portal. Okay, who are you to create a portal? Like, what's your significant part in this universe? You know, are you a magician? If you even say, I'm a magician of the art of the arcane time traveling, hey, you know, at least that's a reason. You know what I mean? Don't just say, hey, congratulations, I am, haha. You know, I'm like, it doesn't really work with me, man. I'm giving this comic a chance to date. I'm hoping it will pick up more better. It's caught my eye enough to want to pick up a few more issues before I put it in my standing order, but not enough to basically say, okay, you know, what's going on and that sort of stuff. So that's more or less the general, I guess, premise of the comic itself. I know it sounds very convoluted, but to simplify it, you have two worlds: the world of the real, which is our world, and the world of the imaginary. The world of the imaginary gets forged by the, you know, imaginations of kids of our world, and that could be good imaginaries or bad imaginations. And it was controlled by this woman who gave order and harmony to both the chaos and the order. She's somehow disappeared. His daughter has disappeared, and some creatures in the world of the imagination want to use her for some some sinister reason. Hasn't really explained as of to date, and that's where it's at the current time. Even though that was more or less the short version, it's kind of within itself quite interesting in the sense that it really plays on imagination, something that I don't actually see that often with comics these days. That's probably one of the most, I guess, pros to these sort of comics, or this comic in particular. One of the things that I've read. Now, a lot of comics out there, of course, as you may be aware of, use, superhuman natural powers, aliens, that sort of stuff, but doesn't really explore the world of imaginations. They have played around, from my knowledge, the inside psychotic state of individuals that I've read, which I'll definitely get in later down the track with other comics that I would recommend and suggest, of course. But it doesn't really necessarily play as the world of imaginations. Most comics, when they try to use the word of imagination or imagination as a whole, as a concept, it's more or less, what if I could be a flying chicken, or what if I could have, powers. It's always a subcontext of to the real world that is currently manifested as it is. I.e., the best way I can explain this is take the world of X-Men. Everybody is, well, not everybody, but there's a population of X-Men who have superhuman abilities, regeneration, claws, laser beams out of their eyes, etc., etc. And some of them imagine to be human as a form of a concept that they more or less wanted to portray in a comic. For example, I guess Wolverine at one stage wanted to become human. He didn't want to necessarily have his mutant abilities because he's considered an outcast, a threat, a dangerous man. But the subcontext to that would be, he would imagine him being human, I suppose. That's just a subcontext, that's a sub-level. This comic, actually, what it does, which I find extremely interesting, that's why I'm so far continuing to pick this up, more or less, it doesn't use that as a subcontext, it uses that as the major premise of the comic. By that I mean, it actually, how would you describe it? It actually uses that as its overall concept. That's its aim, that's its goal, that's its direction that it's going with, as a solid piece, which to me, bonus points. You're really stretching the realities of what can be done in the comic, to be directly honest. That would probably be the major plus. The comic styles is mediocre at best. It doesn't really sell itself as much as I would like it to. Mind you, I know that's pretty cynical. People often say you should read a comic for a storyline. Granted, that is true. However, for the most part, it's not always. A comic is a pictorial storytelling. It basically uses its story to portray the characters, the dialogue, those sort of stuff. And to me, my personal opinion, the art and the dialogue and the story has to work in a unison in order for it to be very captivating to the audience. For example, there's a comic that I've read called Haunt. I will talk about later on, but Haunt has this captivating storyline to it. However, there have been issues in various historic arcs which they totally messed around the actual they've messed around with the art style, and that to me was a major turn-off. Obviously they've gotten some heavy feedback regarding that because they quickly changed it later on later on down the track. But yeah, the art style is as much as important as the storyline. Just to give you a general idea, this is obviously just the first page and that sort of stuff. As far as story goes, you kind of have what's referred to as two story arcs in conjunction, not in conjunction, in emergence, how would I describe it? Two story deliveries which make an overall consistent story arc. That's probably the best way to describe it. By that I mean is, you have in the first half of the comic, just basically, not even the first half, you have several pages throughout the comic where you just have a lecturer more or less with her students describing the various ways of imaginations. I think it was intrusion, extrusion, and imaginary, basically describing how a child or an author or writer will get into the world of the imaginary from a subhuman level, from a humanistic level. Like, how would I go into the world imaginary? I would do it by imagining to be a superhero. I get into that world. That would be intrusion. It's me going into it. Extrusion would be the world of the imaginary extruding itself. In other words, I adamantly believe that I am a superhero, but I'm now going into the world of the real, the humanistic world, which is extrusion. Basically, you believe for whatever reason that you're this individual who you're not, and you're living in this external, universe. And the last one is Emergence, I think it was, I'm not mistaken, where you have two worlds, the humanistic world and the imaginary world. I know that sounds very convoluted and very, mind-boggling, the way I explain it, but it basically has that as a story, a sub-story arc, where basically you just have I'm hoping they somehow merged, I'm not 100% sure, basically describing that from a lecturer's point of view, and then you have the actual story. So it's kind of saying, oh, this could actually happen in the real world. So I like how they actually play with that. What's another picture? Here's a good example. You have this kid with his little stuffed teddy bear. Obviously, his creature becomes bigger into the world of imaginary. He's a bit flabbergasted about that. He's actually like, whoa, what's going on? How is this even humanly possible? But yeah, you have that sort of a character there. It's just describing the various ways. And of course, in him, to go to the land of maybe, he has to actually draw, I guess, a scenery which he just thinks up, which is the concept of imagination. To get to a place you've never been, you need to imagine it. Weird concept, I know, but it's pretty nice. So you can see the artistic style. It's quite mediocre. It doesn't really, you have a talking cat. I think that's interesting, weird. Kind of reminds me of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, for those who know that individual. You have pretty subjective sort of battle scenes. You have little creatures jumping onto his friend. He obviously gets attacked. Yeah. So overall, the actual storyline is captivating within itself. It really is something that I've never really read. There might have been other comic artists, other other novels that have been out there which I've never read that might have played with them, but as far as comic goes, this is the first I've actually picked up that actually uses the core concept of imagination as the core I guess premise of the actual comic, not as a sub context, but actually the driving force of the actual comic. That will probably be the pros. Of course, with every pro there is a con. Unfortunately, the con with this is, if you're after an action-packed sort of comic where it just throws you in, you have this major beast, kicking ass like the Hulk, that sort of stuff, yeah, you're not gonna get it. He gets beaten up almost by little squishy things, if that. Unfortunately, it's not something major that bothersome, but I think that such a titan of a creature who was once a little teddy bear then becomes a manifested giant creature can surely handle himself in a more effective way than just going, oh, there's creatures on me, gotta get it. It's, give me a creature that actually, is empowering, But that's obviously subjective to the individual. If you're into that sort of stuff, story-driven, this is definitely for now somewhat story-driven. It looks like it's going to have a conclusive story down the track. Action-pack as of now doesn't really sell out to me. Mainly, I guess if I can have a future prediction, is you're probably going to have the main protagonist imagine him to be a superhero of some sort or have armor or something. I think that would be pretty badass in my personal opinion. But it's of course dependent on the reader, of course, and that sort of stuff. The art style, as I mentioned, is quite mediocre. If you're after some very stylish, very thin strokes of painting to emphasize certain anguish, happiness, and other stuff, you're not probably going to get this in this comic, unfortunately. If they're going to do it in the future, maybe, I don't know. But at the current time, it doesn't really sell in the artistic point of view. It is consistent, it is gorgeous, but it's pretty mediocre. It's stuff that every professional artist can do. It doesn't really push the boundaries of an artistic flair and that sort of stuff. Of course, the price ranges are standard. It depends where you are, US, Australia, all that sort of stuff. Would I recommend you pick it up? I'll probably do what I do. If you have a local comic store, pick up 1 or 2 every month to read the comics. I wouldn't necessarily put into the standing order as of yet. I haven't, simply because I'm waiting for an issue that really grabs me and says, okay, I've got to read the next issue. So far, it's just a comic that's what I refer to as a pass-by, more or less. Pick it up, look at it, that's nice, put it back, pass by. Pretty cliche as a terminology, but it's something that obviously, what's, I guess, my opinion, I suppose. So as far as that goes, it really depends on the reader. If you're into the play on imagination as a concept, as a core concept of a comic, pick it up. Don't think about it, just pick it up. If you're into something that wants to blend a decent storyline with obviously action pack, this isn't going to really sell it for itself, unfortunately. If you're into a comic that has pretty stylish art, this doesn't really sell it for you as well. So I guess my personal opinion, this is probably plays more or less for the older viewers, for the older readers, the older comic readers, who are more in favor to story-driven sort of comics than they are more or less, you know, action-driven comics. We're younger generations, which is not bad. I picked up a few comics that I still collect, like Sonic the Hedgehog, which is just pound, 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 action, action, action in every comic. And being the person that I personally like more story than that, you know, I'm a sucker for those. Who, you know, that's what comics are there for. It's meant to take you out the real, you know, comics are generally there to take you out of the real world and put you into a universe far beyond that you could ever imagine. So yeah, guys, check it out. Go to your local comic store. I think it's a pretty decent one. I wouldn't necessarily go, you know, crazy trying to, you know, collect all the issues and all that sort of stuff. I'll probably pick up one or two. If you guys want me to give you an update on this comic later on in the year, by all means, drop me, you know, a message, leave a comment. I'm more than happy to do so. Or any of the other videos, more or less, that I've done. Anyway, guys, thank you once again for listening to my comic pick of the week-ish. If let's I don't know, we'll do a week, month, who knows what. The LordTomos comic pick. Let's just stick with that. If you have any recommendations, drop me a hit. I'll pick it up, give you my personal take on it, if you may or may not want it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much once again, and we'll see you until next time. Speed on and take care, guys.